This week on To the Contrary.
First, female baby boomers and their impact on the presidential election. Behind the headlines, the challenges facing women prisoners as they re-enter society.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the boomer election.
The presidential race is heading into the final weeks. Both campaigns are in overdrive. There's one surprising section of the electorate that feels its issues are not being discussed. Boomer women are reliable voters and are expected to have a big say in the outcome of the election. Should the candidates focus more attention on them? This week, Democratic pollster Celinda Lake released a survey that found boomer women have three top concerns.
One, they're extremely worried about their current economic status and retirement security. They're worried about rising prices and rising taxes. They feel very short of money. The second thing we found is that they overwhelmingly and bipartisanly believe that Social Security is an important issue. 71% say it's important for candidates to address this issue, but they don't think the candidates are talking enough about it. And then the third thing, and the really interesting thing for the future, is we found that caregiving was the sleeper issue out there. 55% of baby boomer women are already have been or currently are caregivers.
In fact, 2/3 of boomer women say they're more likely to vote for a candidate who talks about caregiving policies. That might be why Hillary Clinton holds a strong lead among them. Neera Tanden from the Center for American Progress says this is overlooked in favor of stories about how Clinton has not mobilized the youth vote as much as Barack Obama.
She's doing much better with boomer women than even President Obama, who was handily reelected, and I think that is a kind of glaring absence in the political discussion. It's kind of a lot of the ways that boomer women are often overlooked. Boomer women have been there with her, and she'll be a strong champion for them in the White House.
Older voters tend to lean Republican, but there's a stark gender split.
The gender gap is very large between boomer men and boomer women, and if she wins, it will be because of boomer women.
We've never had married men and married women disagree as much as they do over Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And we asked a really fun question. We asked married men and women, do you usually vote the same way as your spouse? And married men said confidently, absolutely, 73%, I vote the same way as my spouse. 49% of married women say, I vote the same way as my spouse. We call that the sure honey factor.
Diana Furchtgott-Roth, a Trump supporter, says the Republican candidate's plan will appeal to women, too.
We're going to elect Mr. Trump by reducing taxes, increasing economic growth. He's going to get that corporate tax rate down from 39% to 15%. It's going to draw businesses back into the country. He's going to reduce the top rate to 33%. Which is going to increase innovation and risk-taking. And for women, he has a child care credit that's going to be refundable against taxes, also against Social Security taxes.
Lake expects Sunday's town hall-style debate will be interesting and substantive, and she calls it a must-win for Trump.
Real voters are going to insist on having their questions answered, and they're going to ask substantive questions that affect their families. They're not going to be so interested in the candidates' families or the candidates' tweets. We've never had a president elected who lost 2 debates. So if Donald Trump loses both debates, then I think Hillary Clinton is going to get into office.
So, Ann Stone, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's true that boomer women haven't been much talked about in this election season. It's all about millennials, young women, women of color, etc., because they're considered a lock for Hillary. Is it true and accurate?
Oh, I think boomer women aren't talked about because the culture ignores them totally. I think this has been one of the disgraces. I mean, we control a good bit of the money, we control a lot of the economic decisions, and everybody ignores us. So it isn't just about the election.
Look, Bonnie, boomer women were Hillary's most ardent supporters in 2008. Now they got a bucket full of new Trump reasons to stick with her.
In this absolutely crazy election year, any candidate who takes any voting bloc for granted is a fool.
And I would agree that boomer women need to be focused on, I think, a little bit more in this election. Certainly there's a lot of...
What, do you think they're going to go for Trump?
No, not the college-educated ones. No, I don't think they're going to go for Trump. I do think that there's a lot more attention on the flashy millennials, but I think there will be a lot of blame going around if there's not enough focus on other demographics as well.
But let me give you some insight from the ground, because I'm dealing right now in coordinating efforts within the campaign. There are women all over this country that have formed spontaneously, organically, Women for Trump operations. I have women who are out there raising money independent of the campaign to do bus tours, to do all kinds of things, again, organically. It's amazing. And they're almost all boomer women. So there is this hidden vote, and I know Celinda Lake has even talked about it. There is a hidden vote, and Kellyanne's talked about it too.
Well,
how big is it?
That's what we'll find out Election Day.
Well, and by the way, in terms of hidden votes, we can go back to the primary and look that Donald Trump underperformed his poll in virtually all of the primary votes. And by the way, it's very nice that there are these spontaneous things happening. And I live in the state of Colorado. I am an outspoken conservative, longtime Republican. I haven't been contacted by the Trump campaign, but guess who I am getting contacted by? Hillary Clinton.
That's because they read your posts.
You know what? The supporters, I'm not surprised that the non-college educated women who support Trump are enthusiastic about them, and that you'd notice them, even if nobody else notices them. Look who they are. They are the most desperate of women. It's their husbands who were depending upon manufacturing jobs. And it is Trump who is putting out the big lie that the future for America lies in somehow getting those manufacturing jobs back from China or Yemen, for God's sake. And it's not that any of us have a good fix on what to do, but if you're living in a trailer camp and the man that you worked for, that you depended on in your life, has not had a job for a long time, and now we find that these middle-aged men are no longer looking for jobs, then you're pretty desperate, and almost anybody who says anything you're going to listen to.
And I was going to add to that in the sense that, I read a profile on one of the women who supports Trump. And the interesting thing I thought about it was that not only was her husband that situation that you just described, but she was. And she was this woman who'd worked for the railroads, had sued them due to sexual harassment. Once you kind of go down the litigation route, anybody could tell you it just gets harder to find jobs in the work that you were trained to do. And so she just was not finding jobs, falling into sort of a financial disarray. And, a lot of that anxiety set in that has led her to sort of support Trump and believe some of the stuff that he's put out there. I would also say, though, that looking at the numbers, you've got these, not college-educated women supporting Trump in strong numbers, about 20-something odd %. And then but then when you go down to the numbers of the college-educated women who are boomers, you've got about 30% of them going with Hillary as opposed to Trump. And the problem is when you're looking at Romney, who won them by 6% in 2012, that's not a good sign for Trump.
Well, say, wait. Since I'm 3-1, 3 anti-Trump, 1 pro-Trump, I think I deserve a little
Go to it, girl.
And the point is, your characterization as if people that support Trump are all desperate and the women are trailer trash is just unacceptable. The women I'm talking about are college educated, they're very bright, and they're out there because they see economic security for their families is dependent upon getting somebody in there who actually understands the economy and understands how to create jobs.
Let me ask
and
you
that's
this.
not Hillary.
Since he's been on, and I'm not trying to be flip, this is actually true. Since he's walked back every proposal he's walked forward, I mean, from the wall, from building a wall to just about every. How do you know? Do you have like a wand where you divine what side of the issue
okay, now
he's actually on?
Now it's 4-1.
You are. No,
it's 4-1.
I'm serious.
No, but
because, and I asked that
but now
because
it's 4-1.
You are most well known in Republican circles for being pro-choice, and yet you're a fervent supporter of Trump.
And I'm also well known for being a businesswoman who started several companies, even launched a national bank, and actually had Donald Trump as a client at the end of the 80s. So I've actually worked with the man, so I know how he is. And I know that he was a wonderful person to work with, clear on directions, left us alone to do our job, checked in at the key times, rewarded us handsomely when we performed, and paid his bills on time. Hey, you can't ask for more.
Well,
but more. Wait, no. But
you're
more.
one of the
Wait. That's just not true. He wouldn't be in business if that weren't the case. But I guess more to the point, he's not a polished politician. Has he had to explain some of the stuff he said? It drives me nuts when he talks and he won't finish a thought because he thinks you know what he's talking about, and then a reporter will say to him, "Well, you said da da," and he looks at him and goes, "No, that's not what I said. It's not what he meant." But sometimes what comes out is not polished. It isn't something he's practiced over and over again, and it's something he's had to learn to change, and that's why now he's doing more of the teleprompter and stuff from reading, because when he does it spontaneously, sometimes the way he says it in his New York fashion is not the way that the person hearing it is going to take it.
What's he going to do for boomer women and caregiving?
Well,
what's his
I
policy?
think what he's going to do is largely, I think both he and Hillary have a very strong concern about caregiving, and I think actually a lot of their policies are the same. The biggest single thing he's going to do for all women and for all men is grow the economy. 1% growth, we're going out of business if it doesn't get better. He knows how to grow the economy. They don't.
I just have to say one thing. If you're worried about your Social Security check, he is going to take 11 million people, 75% of whom pay into the Social Security system, to the tune of $10 billion a year in cash flow.
Talking about illegal immigrants.
Paying into the Social Security, who are sending that money is coming into my check, and I think it's probably coming into yours. I think we're about the same age.
Not taking Social Security.
Oh, okay. Well,
thank you for.
But the fact is that. Eliminating 11 million people, and it actually would be much more than that, taking them out of the workforce is not going to help the economy. It's going to hurt the economy, and it's going to hurt our entitlement programs because those people pay taxes into the system and they get nothing out of it.
So illegal immigrants is the source of our solution to Social Security. That ain't going to work.
No,
let's let it grow.
So I was going to say, to your earlier point, I think that there are college-educated women like yourself who are engaged in the Trump campaign. They're just not as many, is what the numbers are showing. It's all certainly was my point.
I don't think they'll admit that they're supporting him.
So why not?
Why not?
Because they've been shamed. They've been
shamed by
no. They've been shamed by the media so as not to speak up. And that's why Celinda even talks about when they do in-person polls, the numbers are different than when they do anonymous.
All right, but Congresswoman, what's Hillary going to do in terms of caregiving policies? And it's not just for boomer women who are caring at this point for spouses, maybe for some children, but children or grandchildren, but also
family
for
members.
millennials who are in the typical squeeze time, many of them, where they're caring for kids and for parents.
Look, this caregiving is a sleeper issue, and the reason it's a sleeper issue is you can talk about how the millennials outnumber now, but we're looking in the face of a real emergency here because of what we haven't done yet about Alzheimer's disease, about how
dementia.
The same, and how they're, if anything, the kind of workers that we need, well, certainly not the workers here, but the kind that we're trying to put out of the country right now. We need in even greater numbers, and yet nobody's talking about it. If we're going to talk about boomers, talk about who's going to take care of them. Is it going to be their son or daughter? How? They're saddled with terrible debt from going to college, so they're caught in a worse visor than they don't have the equivalent of Social Security to help them out of debt, for example. So I think she understands both ends of the spectrum and have talked about them.
But as we all know, you don't end services without finding somewhere to pay for them. Is she going to raise taxes?
Oh, she said she is.
Well, that's
on those at the very top who've not had their taxes raised now forever. I can't remember the last time. Yes, we have. I think when the president began his second term, there was a deal cut, so there was a somewhat increase in the taxes at the top. And but the fact is that income inequality is the issue of the day. And the way you get at that is to ask, where is the money? Who got the money? And
well,
who got the money are the people at the top.
There are a couple things with Clinton
I agree with
in her
you,
policy
Ann, on that.
One was the tax increase, another was taking money from the percentages on investment income and capital gains. She's also talked about, which I think is the most intriguing proposal in that, is taking away the cap on 118. I think it's 118,000. They don't tax you after that for Social Security. She's talking about taking away that cap. That cap would actually put about 80% more money back on the table. That would take care of most of it, quite honestly. So that's some of her proposals, and I think are pretty interesting. And she's put them out there, and I think it's why a lot of Boomer women are interested in what she has to say.
All right, let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Hervé or at To The Contrary. Behind the headlines, Incarcerated Women, how former women prisoners remain taunted by their criminal records.
I started getting in trouble at the age of 12, and by the age of 15, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I was arrested for grand theft auto of 2 motor vehicles. At that time, I was sentenced to a juvenile residential facility for pregnant teens.
Dina Sarver served 6 months at a detention center for car theft. Once released, she earned her GED and went on to work toward a bachelor's degree in healthcare management. But that effort was short-circuited by prior convictions.
The last class was considered my capstone, and that last class, gave me the real-world experience where I could go out and I can get an internship with an organization and I could work under their belt. And so they said because of my juvenile record, I posed as a risk, and therefore I couldn't fulfill that requirement.
Ria Shah of the Juvenile Law Center is one of many lawyers who advocate for young women in Sarver's position.
Dina emerged from the system really seeking to take hold of her future and to take advantage of all those opportunities. What happened is that every step along the way, when she tried to do that, she was stalled by her record.
Black women are more than twice as likely to be in prison than white women. What concerns advocates such as Vivian Nixon is not just the time these women spend in jail, but what happens next.
The first punishment that one gets when they commit a criminal offense is either a sentence of a fine or probation or prison. The second sentence is a kind of invisible sentence. It's lifelong stigma.
Almost 2 out of every 3 college applicants who check yes to a felony conviction are rejected. And job applicants with criminal records are 50% less likely to receive job offers. Data collected by the Center for Community Alternatives show less than half of institutions collecting this information have written policies in place, and only 40% train staff how to properly interpret the results.
If a student says, yes, I have a criminal record, the schools are responding to that in multiple ways that are inconsistent and don't involve the judgment or assessment of any expert to see whether or not this person really poses a threat to their campus.
Nixon served time and was released in 2001. She was helped by the College and Community Fellowship. CCF helps women with criminal convictions eliminate barriers to higher education and long-term stability.
There's very limited opportunity for education inside of prison if you already have a high school diploma. We are changing that through the work we're doing with the federal government on Second Chance Pell to expand access to people in prison to be able to take college courses.
Sarver has since been accepted into law school. She'll pursue a career in juvenile law and justice reform. She hopes to prevent other formerly incarcerated women from being blacklisted by medical schools.
And many people think that these records are necessary, that people need to know everything about individuals, everything about possible candidates for jobs or anybody else, because it increases public safety. There's no evidence to suggest that this is going to improve public safety in any way.
The idea of blacklisting people for the rest of their lives because of something they did in the past is not good for our society, it's not good for individuals or families or communities.
So, Congresswoman Norton, what's the answer?
I can answer to this one. Excuse me, Bonnie, is pretty clear and straightforward. We were just talking about boomer women being invisible. Well, these women don't exist. Yeah. Women who got records as juveniles to carry for the rest of their life, no matter what they do, expunge those records at 21. look, if we are willing now in the era of criminal justice reform, and that's where we are because we have bipartisan support for criminal justice reform for adults, why not begin with children and certainly with women who commit crimes far less serious than men in our society?
You know, I think that's right, Eleanor. We do need some sort of reform, but I can also look at it from the employer's point of view. I sit on the board of a very large company, has over 100,000 employees. If you hire somebody who then later commits a crime and it turns out that they had a criminal record, the company can be sued. So we need to look at it in ways to also ensure, maybe create a bond system so that somebody is covered by a kind of surety bond, that if they go on to commit a crime while on the job, that the employer isn't held accountable for it. And I think we need to come up with a comprehensive system. Yes, people should not get a life sentence for committing a relatively minor crime when they are under 21, but you also have to allow that employers cannot be held responsible if they later.
I just want to correct one thing. If by law it was expunged, you could not sue the employer then. And that's what I'm calling for. And we're talking about, remember, this is a kid who stole a car at 12 years old. I mean, really, you should not be able.
I know that.
I'll give you a personal example. My brother was chief of police in his small town in Connecticut for 30 years. And the entire time he was a policeman, he had a record of giving juveniles a second chance. So he would eliminate their first time in. Mm-hmm. But if you came back and you committed it again, oh, you got the book thrown at you. And there were kids today that, when he died, that came up to me and said, my life was saved because he gave me a second chance. So I believe in second chances, but as long as the protections are there for the employer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the frustrating thing about the juvenile record to me is, as a younger person, and knowing young people who do dumb things, your frontal cortex of your brain isn't even formed until you're 24. I mean, this is why you do dumb things, and you have that a lot. It's sort of like you're just a young person. You're just like you're learning and you're going through life. And at 12 she did that. She probably wouldn't have done it at 22 because she's like, oh, there's consequences to this. Like, don't go with just your emotions that are kind of billowing up. And so I think that there definitely needs to be something in place for young people to have a second chance, not have it obviously be something that's a risk for the employer, and also just context. I mean, you see a felony on a record, even if it's a juvenile felon, people make a lot of assumptions, think it's violent because most people know violent crimes means a felony. And I worked with folks when I did voter registration, and I talked to them about in Virginia, you couldn't at one point register to vote if you were a felon. But when they were talking about their jobs because they were frustrated and they were looking for work at the same time, they said they would get advised to put down nonviolent felons. So then, employers would be, okay, well, as long as I know he's not an axe murderer, I'll try and at least have a conversation and find out what led to that.
But there's some great private programs. I know in the D.C. area there's a group called Guest House, which takes the women as they come out and helps give them skills. And one of the groups I helped found, Empowered Women International, trains immigrant women and also now has a program where they go in and they work with these women coming out of incarceration as well to teach them business skills and in many cases help them launch their own little businesses.
Is there any reason for employers to be less skeptical of women coming out of prison for nonviolent offenses than men?
Well, I think there's probably, I don't know the statistic on this, but I'd be willing to bet that women have a lower recidivism rate than men do. So, look, I think there's a problem for men, though, too. I mean, our criminal justice system is a mess. Our prisons are a disgrace. People do not get reformed in prison. They are being punished, but we don't help them to go out.
Well, and privatization has been
it's
Donald
been a disaster.
Trump would say a disaster.
It has. It's been a disaster. And
that's an important point about reform. In the adult system, we wiped out reform. We wiped out parole. But in the juvenile system, rehabilitation is still an important mission of the juvenile system. So if the point is to, quote, reform the child, that's when children get reformed after all, then of course you don't want to take into adulthood. That's why this expungement at 21 makes good sense.
Should it be part of a package that I know Congress has considered on and off to to get rid of the sentencing guidelines, which are
no, it couldn't, because we're talking about crimes that are state crimes and local crimes.
Right.
So each state has to do it itself.
Well, and I think of the nice thing about recidivism, when you were talking about that specifically, is that a lot of folks, when they actually, it's not just the rehabilitation inside, but also coming out. If they don't have the tools, if they don't have the skills, they're going to default to what put them back into the prison. And like they have an organization like that in Arlington that does that.
And we're out of time. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.